You're welcome to my channel today. Today we are looking at the life of Jezebel. We're looking at the influence and legacies of Jezebel. Jezebel is one of the most notorious women in the Bible. Yes, that's Jezebel for you. The name Jezebel today has become a metaphor for falsehood, sexual perversion, and all sorts of compromises. Now, so we're looking at Jezebel. Who was Jezebel? Jezebel was the daughter of a Sidonian king called Edbal. Her name in the Phoenician tongue is primrose. It means primrose. While in the Hebrew language, her name actually is garbage, dung. And eventually that's what her life ended up depicting. Garbage, dung, something wasteful, wasted, very unimportant. Now, Jezebel was given in marriage to King Ahab of the northern kingdom of Israel. King Ahab was the seventh king of Israel. So she was married to him and he reigned for 22 years and she outlived him with 10 more years. So that was Jezebel. But Jezebel was known and remembered for very many atrocities. Three key atrocities she's remembered for. Number one, Jezebel is remembered for the killing of Naboth and his sons. Ahab, her husband, wanted to build a vegetable garden close to his palace in Jezreel. So he was interested in the land of Naboth. But Naboth would not sell it to him. Why? Because it was his ancestral land, and according to the law of the Lord, ancestral lands should not be sold and passed to other tribes. It must be maintained within tribes and families. So he would not. Now, Ahab went home sullen and very worried. When Jezebel returned, she found him looking so sullen and all that. When she asked and he told her, she wondered whether that was how he was going to be king. So she was going to teach him how to rule. Wrote a letter, put his seal on it, and sent the letter to the elders in the town of Naboth, and instructed them to organize a feast, put Naboth on a high table, and get some rogues who will accuse him of blasphemy against God and speaking against the king. And that was what happened. So Naboth and his boys were taken out of the city and stoned to death. Nobody else to inherit the land. So Ahab was told, she came back and told Ahab, now you can have the land. And when he went, alas, the prophet Elijah, sent by God, met him there and declared the judgment of God upon the house of Ahab. Those that would die in the country would be eaten by birds, and those that would die in the city would be eaten by dogs. That was the punishment. Now, so Jezebel was a formidable influence. Second thing that Jezebel is remembered for is that Jezebel had some hatred for Jehovah, the God of Israel. She hated Jehovah with passion, and she stood against the worship of Jehovah. That was why she killed the prophets and the priests of God. She hunted the prophets down. Elijah, who was actually very much offended by the idolatry that covered the land, locked up the heavens in prayer for 3.5 years, was on the run. And Jezebel pursued him. We know that after he killed the prophets of Baal and the prophets of Ashura, on Mount Carmel, she vowed to also kill him. Oh, he was so frustrated that he went and cried unto God that he was no better than his fathers, and wished that God took him. And eventually God took him. But before God took him, God told him to ordain those that were going to carry out his judgment over the house of Ahab. He should ordain Hazael to be king of Aram, had ordained Jehu to be king of Israel and then to ordain Elisha to succeed him. Well, she was actually very much against God and the worship of God. 14 that she was remembered for. She was the patron of idolatry in Israel. Yes, she championed the cause of idolatry. The Bible tells us that the 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah ate at her table. She was responsible for their welfare. She sponsored idol worship, altars raised left, right, and center, and and whatever was required for sacrifice, she provided. And we know that when Jehu came for her, Jehu did not only say she was adulterous. Jehu mentioned it very clearly that she actually was a witch. She practiced witchcraft. That was Jezebel. Jezebel was a witch. And when Jehu came for her, finally to kill her, she painted herself like a witch and looked out through the window, when she was thrown down. Well, now that's Jezebel. That's Jezebel. Jezebel stood against the truth of God. Jezebel propagated, falsehood and operated by all forms of spirits. Now, Jezebel was a very negative influence in Israel. Many people actually turned to idolatry because of her. In the book of Revelation chapter 2, verse 20, the Lord Jesus was speaking to the church of Thyatira. Now, and appreciated the church for many good things that they did, but accused the church of one thing, of tolerating this woman called Jezebel, who actually preached falsehood and seduced his servants. Jezebel in Revelation, how comes? That was the spirit of Jezebel. The spirit that operated in Jezebel is still on rampage against the church. So we must make our stand. We know that the churches in Asia Minor that are mentioned in the book of Revelation were basically prototypes. They represent our various churches in different states, different situations. Yes, so we must make our stand and not accommodate the spirit of Jezebel. And truly speaking, the spirit of Jezebel is on rampage in our own time today. And that is why, there can be gay theology, the LGBTQ theology on the pulpit in the Church of Christ. How comes that gay marriages are conducted in church? That is the spirit of Jezebel. Falsehood is preached and sexual perversion practiced in church. That's the spirit of Jezebel. We cannot accommodate, we cannot tolerate such. We must make our stand. Truth must prevail. That's the spirit of Jezebel. Now, we know the end of Jezebel. It was actually very terrible. The house of Ahab was eliminated, exterminated, because of what Jezebel did in collaboration with her husband, who was himself another evil person. The children of Jezebel were killed one after the other. First, it was he himself, Ahab. Ahab was killed in battle, injured in battle, as prophesied by Elijah. He was killed. He bled to death, and his blood was washed, and dogs licked his blood along the river. Prostitutes washed their clothes with his blood. Now, his sons that succeeded him, Joram, and eventually, his in-law Ahaziah were killed by Jehu. Yes, Jehu that was anointed by Elisha, carried out the execution. He killed them both. And he rode into Jezreel. Jezebel looked out, and accused him, called him son of Zimri, who killed his master and all that. And he looked up and he instructed the eunuchs that were actually close to her there to throw her out of the window. And they threw her out of the window. smashed on the ground. She was eaten by dogs. By the time he instructed that her body be buried, when the people got there, they only saw her skull, her hands, and her feet. Just like Elijah had prophesied, those of the house of Ahab who would die in the city would be eaten by dogs. She was eaten by dogs. That was the end of the house of Ahab. Now, that is it. So, why did Jezebel turn out that wicked? Why was Jezebel the way she was? Actually, for us to understand why Jezebel was that wicked, we have to go back to her family background and her marriage. Now, Jezebel was the daughter of Ed-Baal. Ed-Baal, or Etobal in history, was the king of Sidon. So he was the king of Tyre and Sidon, where the kingdom that he actually ruled. So from her grandparents to her parents, her grandparents, father, grandfather, grandmother, her parents, father, mother, all of them were high priests and high priestesses of the goddess Ashtoreth or Ashtoreth. They worshipped and were not just ordinary worshippers, but they were active in the worship as high priests and high priestesses. They were the custodians of the priesthood of the Ashtoreth. And the Ashtoreth, the Ashtoreth is the goddess of the Sidonians, the goddess of Eros and fertility. She is only one in the pantheon of the gods of the Phoenicians. Baal was the male god, Baal, the storm god, and he had consorts. His consort was Ashtoreth, Ashura, and Anath, and they were said to be his sisters and his mother, yet they were his consorts. Now, and they were worshipped through all forms of atrocities. Anal sex, bisexual sex, homosexual, sex, and all kinds of sexual orgies were actually carried out, were done in the temple of these gods as offering to them so that they would bless them with rain, with crops, and fertility. So the family of Jezebel were the custodians of the priesthood, just like the Levites in Israel were chosen as priests by God. The family line of Jezebel were chosen. So wherever they went, they actually championed the cause of these gods. They actually pursued, the worship of these gods. Little wonder in Israel, she pursued it. Yes, she sponsored the prophets. Yes, they ate from her table. And not only in the northern kingdom, even in the southern kingdom, where her daughter Athaliah, got married. In the southern kingdom, where there was a temple of God and the kings were the Davidic kings, yet she influenced her husband into idol worship. Yes, in fact, the Bible tells us that he followed the ways of the house of Ahab because he was connected to them in marriage. So that was how the family of Etobal, Edbal, actually influenced Israel and the whole of the Tyrian kingdom. That was actually how serious it was. Now, beside religious influence based on her background, if you also look at their bloodthirsts, looking at their family, you will understand why she was that bloodthirsty. Her father, Ed-Baal, originally was the priest of Ashtoreth. But at the age of 36, he murdered the king of Sidon, cold-bloodedly murdered the king of Sidon, and took the throne at the age of 36, and established his own dynasty. Yes, so that's how bloodthirsty he is. He killed, and he would not only kill the king, exterminated those that would ordinarily succeed the king. So he killed the children entirely, wiped them out, and then established his own dynasty. Now, Jezebel was bloodthirsty because her father too was bloodthirsty. Whoever stood her way, she eliminated. Killed Naboth, killed the prophets of Baal, wanted to even kill the prophet Elijah. Her daughter Athaliah was another hybrid. She didn't only kill others. When her son died, what did Athaliah do? Athaliah killed the princes, her own grandchildren, killed them and took the throne. And she reigned for 6 years. But one of the princes was spared. In fact, was smuggled out by his auntie Jezebel. She smuggled him. And eventually he was enthroned as king. And then she was killed. And when Athaliah was king, there was jubilation everywhere because of how wicked she was. And that's the family from which Jezebel came. And down the lineage, you would hear of her grand nephew called Pygmalion. Pygmalion killed his brother-in-law, the husband of Dido, a very wealthy man, killed him, to take his wealth. But his own sister, Pygmalion's sister, had to now run from her own bloodthirsty brother. She now ran to North Africa, to the city of Carthage, around Tunisia today, and built a city there, and she became the queen of Carthage. Today, the Tunisians still celebrate her on their currency in 2006. Her emblem, was put on their own currency. And the women in Tunisia today are remembered as the daughters of Dido. And Dido is a, grand niece of Jezebel. So now that's their family tree. They were actually bloodthirsty. Now, that's one. But also looking at her marriage helps you to understand the uniqueness of Jezebel and why she operated. Because her wickedness found expression because of the nature of marriage she had. She was married to Ahab. And the Bible tells us that Ahab actually had followed the way of Jeroboam. He took it very lightly. He followed the way of Jeroboam and added to the crime, to the sin of following the way of Jeroboam, he also married Jezebel. So which means before he married Jezebel, he actually followed the way of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. Jeroboam was the first king of the northern kingdom. When Solomon sinned, the kingdom split in the hands of his son Rehoboam. So Jeroboam was given part of the northern kingdom, and his son Rehoboam was ruling in the southern kingdom. Jeroboam, because he was afraid that the loyalty of the people will turn to Rehoboam in the southern kingdom, because they were still going to Jerusalem to worship Jehovah, decided now to build 2 golden calves. Put one golden calf in Dan and put the other one in Bethel, and told them, Israel, here is your God, and made the worship of the golden calf state religion. So Ahab also worshipped all sorts of idols, all sorts of gods. He went the way of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which means he didn't just worship it, but he encouraged it as a religion, a state religion, encouraged his people to worship these other gods. So he already was an idolater. Then he now married Jezebel, who was already fully into it and virtually a high priestess herself and a witch. So when she came in, these 2 bad heads actually became a rotten head. The combination was very deadly and terrible, very catastrophic for Israel. And it was really, really terrible. So that was what happened to Jezebel. That's the story of Jezebel. So it went, and it was very, very bad. We know, like I explained, Jezebel's end was quite terrible. So that's Jezebel. If you've never known Jezebel, now that's Jezebel. She was this wicked, and it is explained in her background, and she left a very terrible legacy. Very terrible legacy. Many lives were touched by her. Subsequently, I shall be doing a video on her daughter, fully looking at her daughter, Atalaya, so that we will understand, the power of parenting. She parented her, and then she became a hybrid at the end of the day. So here we will stop. I pray you have learned something. I pray you will make your stand against the spirit of Jezebel. May the Lord help us and strengthen us in the name of Jesus Christ. So I encourage you, drop your comment, drop your questions, in the comment section. Click the like button, click the subscribe button. The Lord bless.